To the outside world, Officer Tyrell Gaines was everything a prison guard should be: disciplined, composed, and respected. At 34, he moved with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be loud. His uniform was always crisp. His fade was always clean. And when he walked down the halls of Forsyth State Prison, inmates didn't challenge him, they watched him. Some feared him. Others, especially the women, watched with something else in their eyes. Tyrell had a quiet kind of charm, the kind that didn't ask for attention but drew it anyway. He spoke in measured tones, rarely raised his voice, and unlike the other guards, he didn't bark orders or flex his authority like a muscle. He simply was the authority. And in a place where weakness could get you stabbed in the shower, calm power like his was rare, and respected. The warden loved him. Called him one of the good ones. Said he could defuse a riot with just a stare and a few well-placed words. For 5 years, Tyrell had worked nights, supervising the women's unit and earning a reputation for professionalism. But professionalism, it turns out, is a mask that only needs to hold up during daylight. Because after lights out, Tyrell wasn't the man his badge said he was. It started with little things. He'd linger too long near certain cells. He'd hand out extra snacks, slip a prisoner a cigarette or two. The inmates whispered his name behind closed doors. Some said he was harmless. Others said he flirted. One called him Daddy Gaines, and then laughed like she wasn't joking. Still, no one said anything officially. In prison, silence is survival. But staff started noticing too. A female nurse once caught him alone in the laundry room with inmate Danica Wells, a 29-year-old with long lashes and a quick mouth. When the nurse cleared her throat, Tyrell stepped back fast, too fast. Danica's shirt was rumpled. Tyrell said she had a migraine and he was just checking on her. The nurse reported it, but the claim didn't stick. There was no physical contact. No footage. And Danica, when asked, gave a half smile and said, "What, a girl can't have a conversation." The prison brushed it off. But the rumors didn't stop. 2 months later, another inmate, Kiana Reese, was taken to medical with severe nausea and weight loss. She looked like a ghost, her once round cheeks sunken, eyes dull. The doctor ordered a full blood panel. When the results came back, they hit like a punch to the gut. Kiana had tested positive for HIV. She broke down in the infirmary. Said she didn't use drugs. Didn't share razors. Swore up and down she'd been clean since her intake. When asked about sexual activity, she clammed up. Then cried. Then refused to say anything at all. Word got around. But again, nothing official. The staff chalked it up to poor decisions behind bars. Inmates sometimes sneak around. It happens. But then it happened again. Inmate number 2, Michelle Deans. Same symptoms. Same test. Same result. And this time, she did talk. To a friend. To another inmate. She said she'd been messing around with a CO. When her friend asked who, she whispered, Gaines. Then she broke into tears and begged her not to tell anyone. But gossip in prison spreads faster than fire. Within a week, 5 inmates were claiming to know someone who had done something with Tyrell. Some said they were just rumors. Others said they had proof. But no one was willing to go to the warden. Not out loud. Not officially. Because Tyrell wasn't just a correctional officer, he was powerful. And no one wanted to find themselves mysteriously written up, or worse. Behind his smile, Tyrell was watching too. He could feel the tension in the halls now. The quick glances. The sudden silence when he walked into a room. He knew the whispers had started to curve back toward him. But he didn't stop. If anything, he got more careful. He picked new inmates. Ones who were fresh from intake, desperate for protection, and easy to isolate. He worked nights, there were fewer eyes on him. He'd take the long route when doing cell checks. Pause just a second too long. Slide a note through the crack of a door. Trade favors for silence. And still, no one said anything. Until the 3rd girl got sick. Her name was Sierra Matthews. She was 22. She'd only been in Forsyth for 6 weeks, in on a 10-month drug charge. A first-time offender. Sweet, quiet, terrified of conflict. She started vomiting during breakfast, then collapsed in the yard. Her blood work came back the next day. Another positive. Sierra sobbed in the infirmary, clutching her knees to her chest. She didn't want to say who it was. But her eyes told the story. One of the nurses, an older black woman named Miss Terry, knelt beside her and asked, "Did someone do this to you?" Sierra only whispered, "He told me he was clean." That was the moment everything changed. Miss Terry didn't stay quiet. She went to the warden. She demanded an investigation. And she didn't just point fingers, she named names. She said the pattern was undeniable. 3 HIV cases in a women's unit where the officer in charge was the common thread. She told the warden to pull the night shift logs. Review the camera feeds. Test the staff. The warden stalled. But word had already reached internal affairs. And now the uniform wasn't protection anymore. It was a target. Tyrell's double life, the charm, the silence, the seduction, it was unraveling. And the walls he thought would protect him? They were closing in. But Tyrell wasn't about to go down easy. He knew how the system worked. He knew how investigations could be buried, how files could vanish. He knew how to play the good guy. The helpful officer. The one who'd never even raised his voice to an inmate. But this time, the truth was no longer buried. It was bleeding through the walls. And the next time Tyrell walked into the cell block, all eyes were on him. Because the man they once respected, the man behind the uniform, was now the most dangerous person in the building. The shift began in whispers. A nurse, Miss Terry, was the one who broke the silence. Inside Forsyth State Prison's medical wing, overworked and understaffed thanks to chronic turnover and low pay, she noticed something strange. 3 women, unrelated, tested HIV positive within 6 months of incarceration. But none had tested positive on intake. These were seroconversions happening inside the walls. Nearly half of seroconverters in Georgia prisons slip in negative and emerge positive amid incarceration, according to CDC data. KFF Health News. But this chain of infections wasn't random disease spread, it was deliberate. Inmate 1, Danica Wells. Danica had always been a little too smiling. She flirted with every guard who passed the chow hall. After her test came back positive, she cried, eyes blazing with fear. A nurse asked if she'd been intimate with prison staff. She shook her head violently. Kept repeating, "Please don't let them know." She refused to name names, fear was institutional here. Inmate 2, Kiana Reese. Kiana was new to the system, scared and soft-spoken. Her blood work came back just days after Danica's. HIV positive. When questioned, she sobbed and whispered, "A guard." When pressed, she nodded toward Tyrell Gaines, but then looked terrified. She said nothing more. Miss Terry hauled herself before the warden's desk. She laid the 3 confidential files on his sweat-slicked mahogany surface. "We have a pattern," she said. 3 separate women, same prison officer on night shift. None of them were positive on intake. 2 won't talk. The 3rd, she won't name him, but everyone knows who it is. The warden listened, eyes flickering. He tapped the stack of files. "Get me internal affairs." Investigation begins, but not quietly. IA investigators entered the prison with clipped voices and subtle suits. They combed locker logs, cross-referenced duty rosters, pored over transfers. If there was a pattern, they would find it. Tyrell noticed. The flicker in his colleague's eyes, the gossip as he passed the staff bathroom, became impossible to ignore. He doubled down. Stayed longer in empty hallways. Offered contraband cigarettes in exchange for silence. Flounced behind his badge like armor. But paranoia began tracing circles behind his skull. The prison reacts. Word spread like contraband fire. Inmates whispered in cell blocks, clutching cardboard cups in rec rooms. "It's Gaines," they said. "He's the one." Guards shifted uneasily at the mess hall. No one admitted it. But whispers turned into closed-door huddles. Fear simmered as if the walls themselves were bleeding the rumor. Understaffing at Georgia prisons, up to a 50% vacancy rate, and rampant corruption set the scene, allowing abuse to blossom in shadows. AJC. +3. Georgia prisoners speak. +3. AP News. +3. A culture of silence enveloped Forsyth. No one dared speak directly. Not even to their supervisor. Inmate 3, Sierra Matthews steps forward. Sierra Matthews was soft-spoken and anxious. Shepherded in on a misdemeanor drug charge. 6 weeks inside, and she collapsed during breakfast. She had nausea, dizziness. Doctors ran tests. Then, HIV positive. Sierra broke under the nurse's gentle questioning. "He told me he was clean," she whispered. "I trusted him." That was the spark Miss Terry needed. Pressure intensifies. Miss Terry demanded results. Results led to confrontations. Investigators requested footage of the laundry corridor at night, where Sierra had claimed the guard had entered her cell. The footage had been erased. Lock logs were missing entries. One security badge was removed that shift. Tyrell's access logs had a small gap, a gap too neat. Someone was protecting someone, or covering tracks. Tyrell gets the call. IA wants to talk. He's never been so cold. But he doesn't go. He turns off his phone. He knows they'll send for him. He knows the color of his future is gray, like prison concrete. He walks cell blocks at night, alone, thinking about the irony. He joined corrections to help people rebuild. Now he's the disease. Now his mask is cracking. Behind the scenes facts drive tension. Georgia prison inmates have historically had infection rates 8 to 10 times higher than the general population due to unsafe sex, lack of condoms, and institutional neglect. Wikipedia. But what Miss Terry uncovered wasn't spread by shared needles or violence, it was by command of crossed boundaries. The final push. Then Sierra signed a written affidavit. Under pressure, she named Tyrell Gaines as her attacker. That sealed the deal. IA froze activity but had already passed the files to the Cobb County DA. The case had teeth now. They subpoenaed devices, logs, and staff testimony. But rumors said Tyrell was tipped off, whispers in staff lounge that IA interviews were coming for him next shift. Pressure turned to panic. Guards began watching his back. The prison culture, where officers are paid low, overworked, and sometimes coerced into illegal arrangements, had created a predator who was protected by silence and weakness in oversight. AP News. Georgia prisoners speak. The turning point. One late evening, Internal Affairs reappeared. They brought Sierra to speak again. They asked if she'd testify in court. She nodded, tears trembling at the brim of her eyes. That moment, the air changed. Tension thickened like a storm ready to break. And Tyrell? He clocked out at midnight. He didn't come back next morning. Cliffhanger. Tyrell was gone. The prison braced for an announcement. And somewhere, in a locked cell or abandoned locker, a badge waited. Tyrell Gaines had always known how to wear a mask. Calm, commanding, flirtatious when it suited him. But for the first time, that mask was starting to slip. Whispers had started circulating outside the prison walls, too. Not from fellow officers, not from inmates, but from people who had known Tyrell before the badge ever clipped to his chest. One name came up first, Chanel Ward. Chanel hadn't spoken Tyrell's name in nearly a decade, not since 2014, when their relationship collapsed under the weight of betrayal, silence, and blood tests. She was 23 then, working nights at a downtown Atlanta diner and putting herself through nursing school. Tyrell had swaggered into her life like he owned it, smooth talk, romantic dinners, the kind of attention that makes a girl feel chosen. But what she didn't know was that while he was choosing her, he was also choosing silence. 2 months into the relationship, Chanel started getting sick. Weakness, night sweats, weight loss. The ER visit that followed turned her world upside down. Her HIV-positive diagnosis came like a gunshot, sudden, violent, final. She hadn't been with anyone else. She knew who gave it to her. And she went to the police. She filed a report. But Tyrell was 2 steps ahead. He spun a story about her cheating, called her unstable, pointed out that she had no hard evidence. No proof he ever knew he was infected before her diagnosis. The case dissolved quietly. No charges. No consequences. And Tyrell? He disappeared from her life without a trace. Until now. When Internal Affairs began digging into Tyrell's background, spurred by the 3rd infected inmate finally naming him, they didn't expect to find much. His official record was clean. His employment application to Forsyth State Prison? Squeaky. No prior arrests, no red flags. But one investigator, a detail-obsessed analyst named Miller, noticed something odd in Tyrell's health records submitted during hiring. There was a lab report missing. One that should have confirmed his routine physical exam before duty clearance. The slot was there in the file, but the paper was gone. So Miller dug deeper. Subpoenas. Old emails. archived files from an Atlanta public clinic. And what he found shattered the illusion Tyrell had built: a 2014 HIV diagnosis, formally documented, buried under layers of bureaucratic neglect. He had lied on his prison job application. And that lie had consequences. Back inside Forsyth State Prison, the mood had shifted drastically. The infected inmates, Jamarcus Holloway, Lionel Reed, and D'Angelo Cook, had formed a quiet alliance. They weren't friends before. Each was from a different tier, serving time for different crimes. But now they shared something far more intimate than cell blocks. A virus. And a secret. They agreed to testify. But only under two conditions: they'd be moved to protective custody, and Tyrell had to be taken off duty. The warden agreed, at least on paper. Behind closed doors, however, things weren't so simple. Tyrell had built powerful friendships among the staff. He was tight with the captain, on first-name basis with board members, and had even dated a female guard 2 months back. If word got out that a guard was HIV positive and infecting inmates, the prison's name would be dragged through national news, and lawsuits would rain down like hellfire. So the investigation stalled. Worse, someone was tipping Tyrell off. It started with the silence. He no longer smiled as easily. His flirtatious remarks turned into clipped nods. He skipped lunch breaks. And one day, he never showed up at all. At 6:32 a.m., Officer Tyrell Gaines signed out of the guardhouse. At 6:45, a call was placed from a burner phone to his mother in Macon, Georgia. And by 7:10 a.m., Tyrell was gone. His car was found abandoned later that night in a Walmart parking lot, 72 miles south. Inside was his badge, his uniform shirt neatly folded on the passenger seat, and his correctional-issued firearm, missing 2 bullets. There was no note. No phone signal. Just the silence he always used when the heat got too close. The warden declared him AWOL. The Georgia Department of Corrections launched a manhunt. But privately, investigators feared the worst: Tyrell might not be running. He might be planning something far more sinister. Back in her small Atlanta apartment, Chanel saw Tyrell's face on the news. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, but from validation. All those years ago, no one had believed her. Not the DA. Not the cops. Not even her closest friends. But now, 3 inmates. 3 lives. 1 name. She sat on her worn-out sofa, staring at the television screen like it might apologize. But it didn't. And the rage that had been sleeping inside her for years finally stirred. She picked up the phone and called the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. 2 days after Tyrell's disappearance, a letter was delivered to the Forsyth warden's office. No return address. No fingerprints. Just 1 sheet of paper inside. "Tell them I was never the only one." They knew. They always knew. It wasn't signed. But the implication was clear: Tyrell wasn't the only guard blurring boundaries behind bars. The prison system, broken and complicit, had enabled his secrecy for years. The cover-ups, the silencing of inmate complaints, the failure to verify his health records, it had all paved the road to this moment. Now the question wasn't just where is Tyrell Gaines? It was, how deep does this go? The infected inmates were relocated to a private facility for their protection. The lawsuit against the Department of Corrections was being drafted. Chanel Ward's story resurfaced online, drawing national attention. And across Georgia, parents, prison advocates, and public health officials demanded answers. But the man at the center of it all? Still missing. A warrant was issued. His photo plastered on news networks. Whispers grew louder. Some said he fled to Florida. Others believed he changed his name and left the country. But one former inmate offered a darker theory: he ain't running. He's hiding. And he's gonna take someone down with him before he's done. They weren't wrong. Because the next time Tyrell was seen, he wouldn't be wearing a badge. He'd be surrounded by blood. And it wouldn't be his own. It was 6:43 a.m. when the janitor found him. Officer Tyrell Gaines was face down in the staff break room, arms limp, body unnaturally twisted, a bottle of Grey Goose tilted on the table beside him. The first call from Central Dispatch labeled it a suspected overdose. Maybe a suicide. Maybe the guilt finally caught up with him. But within hours, the narrative would begin to crumble. Word spread fast, too fast for the prison walls to contain it. The staff room, located just outside cell block C, had always been a quiet place. Microwave. Vending machine. Old recliner. That morning, it became a crime scene. Tyrell's uniform was rumpled. His knuckles were bruised. Blood had dried behind his ear, almost hidden by the collar of his shirt. But what really made the coroner pause was the indentation on the back of his skull, a blow hard enough to crack bone. Not a fall. Not a stumble. It was blunt force trauma. The vodka? Barely touched. The BAC report later confirmed it, 0.03, far from fatal. Someone staged it. Warden Blake Harmon arrived red-faced and silent. The kind of silence that holds back panic. The room was quickly sealed off. Security footage from the hallway that night? Deleted. Motion logs? Missing between 2:17 a.m. and 4:02 a.m., a window wide enough for someone to come and go unnoticed. One officer's badge? Reported lost that same morning. But there was no sign of forced entry. So who had access? A list of names was drafted. Only 6 guards had access to that break room. One of them had called in sick. Another said she was on patrol. The third? No alibi at all. But none of them were seen entering the break room. That's when the theory emerged: someone had used a stolen ID. Someone with enough knowledge of the layout, and a reason. The 3 infected inmates had just agreed to testify. 3 days earlier, internal investigators had quietly interviewed each of them separately in a secure unit. All 3, Darnell Cooper, Kevin Marks, and Luis Esquivel, said the same thing. They'd had sex with Tyrell Gaines. Sometimes for favors. Sometimes by coercion. Sometimes just to feel human. They knew the risks. But none of them knew he was positive. And now, all 3 had tested positive for HIV. One had a T-cell count below 200. AIDS. Luis was the one who'd cracked first. He told the nurse during an offhand conversation, whispering it between tears, it was the officer with the cologne. The one who always smiled. That broke the silence. Now, all 3 were supposed to appear before the Internal Oversight Board the following week. Tyrell knew it. Someone had warned him. Prison gossip spreads fast. Especially when the stakes are life and death. Tyrell had vanished for nearly 18 hours the day before his body was found. No one logged his exit. His phone went dark at 11:09 p.m. that night. But a single ping off a nearby tower placed him near the admin building just after 1:30 a.m., the same building housing the break room. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. He didn't kill himself. He was gonna flip on someone. Maybe he knew something bigger. The rumors weren't just about revenge. Some believed Tyrell had dirt on higher-ups, maybe even proof of other guards abusing inmates, or medical logs showing the virus had spread long before the first inmate came forward. But with no footage, no witnesses, and a staged crime scene, the case went cold fast. Too fast. What remained were fragments. A wiped hard drive. A deleted keycard log. A latex glove found stuffed into a trash bin outside the break room, containing traces of Tyrell's blood, but not his DNA on the inside. Somebody wanted him gone. And somebody knew how to make it look like he gave up on his own life. The warden publicly called it a tragedy. A dedicated officer who sadly took his own life. We mourn the loss. But behind the walls, inmates weren't buying it. And neither were the 3 men he infected. They were transferred to another unit within 48 hours, for safety. Luis Esquivel was caught pacing in his cell the night Tyrell's death was announced, whispering over and over, "They silenced him. Now they'll come for us." By the end of the week, inmate movements were restricted. No outside media allowed. The story never made national headlines. Just a 2-line local blurb: Forsyth Correctional Officer found dead in apparent suicide. But in the shadows of Cell Block C, silence settled like dust. The real story? Buried beneath layers of protocol and fear. No charges. No arrests. The internal investigation? Quietly closed. But there was one last, chilling detail that never made it into any report. A handwritten note, found inside Tyrell's locker, dated 3 days before his death. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just one line. "If I go down, I'm taking all of them with me." But now he was gone. And whatever he knew, went with him. The prison went still. Forsyth Correctional Facility entered full lockdown the morning after Tyrell Gaines' body was discovered. Doors slammed. Lights flickered. Every hallway echoed with the sound of boots and suspicion. No yard time. No phone calls. Cells were stripped. Contraband checks began before breakfast and didn't stop until nightfall. Inmates stood against walls in silence, watching officers who looked more paranoid than powerful. The message was clear: they were hunting someone. Investigators from the Georgia Department of Corrections arrived within hours, this time accompanied by agents from the Attorney General's office. They didn't believe Tyrell's death was a suicide anymore. Too many inconsistencies. Too many buried files. Too much erased. They believed someone used a stolen staff badge to access the restricted wing that night. The focus narrowed to 3 inmates, Darnell Cooper, Kevin Marks, and Luis Esquivel, the men who had come forward about Tyrell's sexual abuse. They were the ones with motive. The ones who stood to lose everything if Tyrell talked first. But none of them had access. And all 3 denied involvement. Kevin demanded a lie detector test. Luis broke into hives from stress. Darnell sat in the corner of his cell whispering, "I didn't touch him. I just wanted him gone." But it didn't end there. Because on the 7th day of lockdown, a 4th man stepped forward. His name was Malik Richardson. He was 28, serving a 14-year sentence for armed robbery. He hadn't been on anyone's radar. No reports. No complaints. No medical anomalies, until now. He requested to speak with a nurse. His HIV test came back positive. "I never said nothing because I thought it was just me. I ain't want nobody looking at me like that. But I saw what y'all did to them boys. And that man? Tyrell? He ain't no victim." Malik's statement opened the floodgates. He described encounters in the laundry room, behind the commissary, sometimes even inside the officer's supply closet during night shifts. Always the same pattern: Tyrell offering snacks, favors, extra blankets, then touching, then threatening. "If I talk, I get another charge." He said he got friends in admin said I'd never get parole. Malik didn't want justice. He wanted peace. But in coming forward, he shattered the illusion that the abuse had been isolated. Tyrell had preyed on at least 4 inmates, likely more. Men who'd already lost everything but their bodies. And he'd weaponized even that. The state had no choice. An internal task force was assembled, fast-tracked by pressure from local activists and legal groups who had caught wind of the growing scandal. Media outlets picked it up. Corrections officer found dead amid sexual misconduct investigation. A sanitized headline. But the truth behind it wasn't clean at all. The task force found glaring holes in Forsyth's oversight system. Tyrell Gaines had never received a full psychological evaluation during hiring. He'd been written up twice for boundary concerns with inmates. One incident involved him being found alone with a prisoner during a power outage, the other for excessive commissary purchases that weren't logged. Both times, reports were quietly closed. He wasn't reprimanded. He was promoted. The badge he used the night he died? It belonged to Officer Shonda Willis, who claimed she left it in her unlocked locker during a shift change. Protocol violation. But not uncommon in a place where procedure had long stopped being enforced. Surveillance backups hadn't been uploaded in weeks. The logbook for cell block C had 5 missing entries. Tyrell's final shift was never signed off by a supervisor. The task force published a 43-page report. It outlined negligence, mismanagement, failure to protect, and what it called a pattern of permissiveness toward staff misconduct. But no one was fired. The warden, Blake Harmon, retired 6 weeks later with full pension. Shonda Willis was reassigned to another facility. And the 4 infected inmates? They were transferred, separated, and placed on antiretroviral therapy. That was it. No restitution. No apologies. Just pills and silence. Luis Esquivel wrote to his sister from the infirmary, "They moved me again. Different walls. Same ghosts." Kevin tried to sue the state. His case was dismissed for failure to exhaust internal remedies. Darnell stopped talking altogether. The 4th man, Malik, began writing poetry. In one piece, he scrawled, "They say justice is blind. But I think she's deaf too. She ain't hear us screaming." On paper, the reforms looked good. Guards were retrained. A new ethics hotline was created. LGBTQ+ sensitivity seminars were introduced quarterly. The facility got a new mental health counselor. But none of that uninfected 4 men. None of that brought Tyrell Gaines to justice, not the courtroom kind, anyway. His body was buried quietly in a private cemetery outside Macon. No funeral. No obituary. Just a grave with his name and 2 dates, the day he was born, and the day everything unraveled. Behind closed doors, some called it karma. Others called it a cover-up that got sloppy. One internal email from a deputy warden leaked weeks later. It read, "We dodged a bullet. Imagine if this had gone national." But for the inmates still inside Forsyth, it had gone national, in the way that trauma always does. Every breath reminded them. Every cough. Every blood test. Every whispered joke from another guard who thought they didn't understand, better watch your back, don't want Tyrell's curse on you. The abuse had been quiet. The infection, silent. The justice? A whisper. And though the task force eventually disbanded, the fear never did. No one was ever charged for Tyrell's death. No one ever confessed. The surveillance footage was never recovered. The glove was destroyed during testing. All that was left was speculation. But in prison, speculation is a language. It's how stories live when justice dies. Tyrell Gaines infected 4 men. Then someone made sure he'd never infect anyone else. But the real sickness? It wasn't just HIV. It was the silence. The fear. The broken system. And that is still alive.